Story 1. The Visitor. I am going to tell you a story from my childhood, but I admit that I am not sure the events of the story ever truly happened at all, although I acknowledge that there might be nothing beyond present human understanding happening here. I have to write this account down just in case. I will do my best to keep this story as objective as possible. The first event I will describe happened one night in what must have been January, as I remember it happening just after winter break had ended. I must have been 9 at the time, because I remembered telling the events of that night to Mrs. J., my 4th grade teacher. I am not sure if I was asleep or awake. Regardless, I heard a scratching noise. It was almost imperceptible at first, but it grew louder and louder. It grew loud enough that I was about to run down the hall to my mother's room when I saw it. I am not sure I am capable of accurately describing what it was. It did not have form, as much as it was an ever-changing surface of slime. The only feature on the opaque slime was what seemed to be suckers on its rolling surface, like on an octopus. I did not scream. I cannot describe why, but I wasn't even scared, really. Its surface formed and reformed again, until a gaping mouth appeared and spoke to me. Its voice wasn't like a human's voice, although it did speak to me in English. It wheezed its words at me in the same scratching sound that I had heard before. "How old are you?" it asked. I told it my age, and all it said back was, "Not yet." I don't remember anything else after that. I must have fallen back asleep, as my next memory of the event is telling my mother about it the next day. I told several adults of my visitor, to which they all reassured me that it was a dream, as any parent, teacher, or grandparent would, and that was that. That would have been the end of the story, except many years later I had a similar experience. This event, I am certain, occurred in January. I was awoken again by a scratching sound. I had not thought much about the previous encounter, but as soon as I heard that noise, the events of that night flooded back into my mind. I sat up in bed, and there was the creature. It looked the same as in my memory, but I did not feel the calm of our first encounter. Although it was not fear, I did not feel at ease. Again a mouth formed from nowhere, and it inquired, "How old are you?" I told it my age, and it replied, "Not yet." As last time, I have no more memories of the encounter. I remembered telling my mother. She did not recall the last time I told her, but she did seem concerned. So concerned that she had me talk to someone about my night terrors. After talking to him for a few sessions, the psychologist told us that my night terror was likely the result of anxiety about going to high school next year. This seemed like a reasonable explanation, as I was always a shy, lonesome individual, and the prospect of high school was bothersome to me. Based on this, I must have been 13 at the time of that encounter. The final encounter is the one that is by far the most disturbing, as I remember it best. I was 17 and awoke. At least I believe I was awake to the horrible scratching sound. I had thought about that previous night from time to time, and once again recognized the sound immediately. This time, when I saw the creature, it felt different. I felt dread, a deep dread that I had never felt before, and I hope I never feel again. The creature waited a second, and then it asked that question, "How old are you?" I was frozen, Breathless, it felt as if several minutes had passed with the creature silent. Waiting for my reply, I finally built up the courage to gasp out an answer. And it replied, "Next time." As every time before, I remember nothing besides waking up the next morning. This time I told no one of the events that transpired that night. However, I have thought of that night incessantly. With paranoia, I have questioned the meaning of his reply. The reason I am choosing to write this now is because I believe I have figured it out, and the implication is frightening and one I must share while I still can. I hope I am wrong. I'd like to think that the first encounter was a child's imagination, and the second was a result of adolescent anxiety. But what of the third? Maybe these events were just recurring dreams, a phenomena that most people experience at some point, or maybe these events never really happened at all. After all, my academic training has taught me that human memory is extremely susceptible to losing, adding, or changing pieces of information. I hope one of these explanations is true rather than what I am about to propose. These occurrences have happened for years since I was 9. Now that I think of it, the creature may have visited me when I was 5 and even when I was 1, and I simply haven't remembered it. Every encounter, it has told me not yet until this last one. Well, if I am right, the next encounter will be soon. I am 21 now, and it is January. I wish I could remember the exact day that the visits happen, assuming it does happen on the same day every time. I have been up paranoid every night so far. I am terrified to know what next time means. Story 2. Lullaby Rock, a Candle Cove memoir. Just a little, in the right kind of way. Kids enjoy being scared. They don't find loud and horrific things fun. But if something gives off a vibe of the perfect proportion of creepiness, it will turn a child's head and, instead of triggering his uneasiness and cause him to back away, it instills in him a sense of adventure so that he may find out for certain if there really is anything from which to back away. Candle Cove did that for me. Maybe it was the weird puppets. Maybe it was the themes of haunted caves, murderous pirates, and skin-grinding skeletons. Maybe it was the weird camera and sound quality. Whatever it was. I was 5 years old in 1971 and caught the pilot one day. A mom was out running errands, and thus the dial was mine to turn. I came upon the show and was instantly hooked. I've been reading up. Recently, my curiosity reignited and my caution diminished about this theory that the show was just weak signal static, and these rumors about this screaming episode that apparently earned the laughingstock and her crew an abrupt pull from the seas and the Channel 58 airwaves. I can tell you right now, it wasn't just dead air or snow. However, I can't confirm the existence of episode 12 because I didn't get a chance to see it, or for that matter, any of the episodes in the second season. After all, they only aired once. This is the story of why I missed them. On Tuesday, September 21st, 1971. I came home from school in my mom's clunky Volkswagen. Since there was nothing particularly interesting on in Mom's eyes, she would forfeit the television to me for an hour whilst she rode on her exercise bike in the basement. And, of course, that day, just like several weeks leading up to it, the dial turned right to 58. Episode 6 of Season 1. I would later find out was called Ship Crash. Appropriately enough, the premise involves Percy musing about the lovely song of the singing dolphins. A woman is heard rhythmically cooing in the background and winds up, falling asleep at the helm of Laughingstock, and apparently sleep steering, crashing her into a large, jagged rock jutting out of the waters in a corner of the cove. The rest of the episode involves Janice and Poppy frantically trying to repair their ship before it sinks, all the while fighting sleep. Eventually, they spot a strange tree growing near the peak of the mountainous rock and decide it would make great torch wood for distress beacons. So Janice goes to fetch it. On her journey, she begins to sleepwalk, which is how she comes across Susan Siren. Susan, like most of the other characters on the show, had a cheap but almost intentionally strange design. She was not a puppet, but an actress, with her body and face painted a sea-greenish pallor. Her lips a vibrant orange, to complement it. She was dressed rather, well, inappropriately for a children's show, her breasts only obscured by a metallic brassiere, small chains possibly intended originally for necklaces, serving as the straps. Her bottom piece was also fashioned in this way, with a large, obviously papier-mâché chain attached to her iron panties, and the rock behind her, meant to shackle her there. The top half of her head, including her eyes and nose, was concealed by a headpiece fashioned to make her look more cartoonish, but it also had a pale green skin, as well as orange hair and large, spherical orange eyes to match the lipstick. Susan Siren explains to Janice that she was condemned to Lullaby Rock centuries ago, when a fleet of ships almost crashed due to her hypnotic, sleep-inducing singing. Janice laments that she cannot free Susan, but promises to return to visit if Susan promises to lure another ship without crashing to the rock to rescue them. Susan agrees and sings a peaceful song about your hard work at sea and how it's earned you a nap. That day I came home from school especially drained. I remember that much. What had happened in kindergarten that would leave a 5-year-old so exhausted is lost to time. But I remember being tired. So, taking Susan's advice, I switched from a sitting position on the couch to a laying one, and let my heavy eyes sink. Only seconds after my eyelids made everything dark, I heard the song end, and Susan boasts to Janice, "Now, watch this." My eyes fluttered open, eager to see what had happened, but I was somewhere else. The room was white, as were the sheets on the bed I had apparently been tucked into. There were silver, boxy machines surrounding me, beeping monotonously. A little tube poked into my arm and connected it to a hanging pouch of clear liquid. I wanted to touch it, but was afraid of the pain. I wanted to scream, but a large tube had been shoved in my mouth. I wanted to cry and struggle and kick down the walls, but I was too weak, so I settled for sobbing. After a few minutes of that, a woman in a white dress rushed in and called for a doctor, who simply studied me. But he did call my mother, and after I was unhooked from all those machines and latched onto her, exchanging with her happier sobs, she sat me down to explain that I had been in a coma for nearly 2 years. So why is my curiosity only rekindled now? I suppose I never related it to the show. The doctors never gave a straight answer as to why this happened to me, so who else could know of one? I only started looking into it again about a week ago, around a month after Mom's funeral. I was going through some of her tax receipts when I found an empty envelope from NASA dated December 29th, 1971. The kind of envelope a check might arrive in. Story 3. Sniff. Let me tell you all a story. It's one which I think is interesting, but at the same time frustrating. For me, you see, it's not mine, and for that reason I can't develop it myself or adapt it into a complete tale. It's supposedly an experience someone actually had, but the account seems so well rounded that I'm suspicious of it. I have a niggling feeling that it might come from something already published. I detest plagiarism in any form, and for that reason I'd hate to take the account, build upon it, then later discover I had taken something from another writer. There's also the possibility that it is an urban myth or legend that I'm unaware of, but the truth is the story bothers. Emmy, I really would like to know if anyone here has actually heard of it. I'll do my best to relate it to you now. Is it just a published story or based on a genuine experience? Many years ago, my dad had a drinking buddy who was also a school teacher. They knew each other well and would often catch up over a few pints, discussing everything from work to politics, to almost anything you could think of. The usual pub banter. One night, one specific conversation they had together always stuck in my dad's mind. It was a quiet midweek evening, and their local was quite empty with just a few of the regulars popping up the bar. As they sat there, the conversation ebbed and flowed between the drinkers and the staff, eventually landing on the topic of ghosts. More specifically, did they exist? And had anyone there ever seen one? Of course, as these things go, they all took turns describing strange supernatural occurrences. Things that go bump in the night. All of the stories were the same in that they were second-hand in nature. The accounts were of friends, family, and acquaintances who had encountered the paranormal, but no one there could claim to have seen a ghost themselves. No one but for the school teacher. The story he told my dad and the others there that day was that he had been privy to something quite frightening a few years earlier in a suburb of Glasgow called Govanhill. He had an aunt. The man was caught between moves and needed somewhere to sleep for a few nights, and so she happily took him in. It was a small flat with only one bedroom, but there was a sofa bed in the lounge which was not entirely uncomfortable, and would at least provide him with somewhere to rest before sorting out his living arrangements. After a nice meal and some polite conversation, the school teacher sat to her room for an early night. He was tired and hoped to get to sleep soon enough as well, and, after pulling out the sofa bed, switched off the lights and closed his eyes. Quickly he fell asleep. He awoke to darkness. It was still the middle of the night, and he wondered why he had stirred, considering he was usually a heavy sleeper and rarely woke before the morning. Then he heard it, a noise. There was definitely something in the room with him. The sound was unusual, but not unidentifiable. It was not unlike someone breathing, quickly followed by a sharp inhalation which the school teacher could only describe as a sniffing sound. Readying himself to get out of bed, turn on the light, and see what was causing the unusual noise, his eyes now adapted to the pitch black. While no details could be seen, the breathing and sniffing noises began to edge closer to him. He was now convinced that there was something unwelcome in the room with him, and by the shuffling noise which now accompanied it, he was certain it was substantial. Of course, he was panicked. Part of him wanted to rush into his aunt's room and barricade the door. Another part preferred to stay still and not disturb whoever was there. Perhaps they had a knife. The thought of some burglar stumbling around in the dark with a blade only made him more apprehensive. He decided that he would lay there quietly and bide his time. Maybe the housebreaker would just take something and leave, without altercation. But then what of his aunt? Had she been hurt? Then a warm, moist breath blew across his face as someone leaned over him. Trembling, he reached out his hand instinctively, touching something cold and damp hovering only inches away. Leaping out of bed in horror, he knocked over a table as he made his way to the door, tripping clumsily and landing on the floor with a painful thud. The school teacher's aunt found him in the hallway, dazed, yelling for her to get out of the flat. She seemed strangely unafraid, and after switching on all the lights showed him that the place was quite empty, including where he had slept, calming his nerves with a drink and a snack. She sat him down and explained what she believed had happened. The story goes, and this part one, know to be true, that underneath Govanhill, and therefore his aunt's flat, there once lay a large network of prosperous and important mines in the 19th and early 20th centuries, while they had been the site of many unfortunate cave-ins, gas leaks, and accidents. The aunt was convinced that she had often heard in that room the noises of those who had lost their lives down there, while she had never experienced anything quite as potent as the school teacher, who was visibly shaken. She was more concerned about the poor apparition of an old pit mule trapped in darkness, trying to sniff its way out from that suffocating place, with only its cold, damp nose to guide it. Story 4. Notes. All this shit started when I found that little note on a square piece of paper I found at the bottom of a box I was moving out of my basement. It read, "Hello, please respond." I had no idea how long the paper had been there. Those boxes had sat in my basement since I moved in. I ignored it until the next morning, when I opened my coffee maker to throw out the grounds, and inside was a sopping wet piece of paper that read, "Please respond, please help." I figured it must have been put inside my coffee maker by whoever was pulling this pointless prank, because it wasn't there when I put my coffee grounds in. I found more notes under my mousepad, inside my computer tower, while I was putting in some new RAM, between the layers of tissue of my toilet paper roll, under my DVD player's disc tray, places that no one would ever look, places you'd never think of. Putting a note, places you knew no one would ever look, and it would be foolish to put a note, because who knew when they would see it? But it kept happening, and they all said the same thing every time, begging me to respond and help them. Being the retard I am, one day I just got fed up when I found one inside a cup in my dishwasher right after I had run it. The paper was dry. I wrote on the back of it, "Hello, I'm responding. Please explain your situation," and slid it under a crack in my bath-fitted tub. No sooner had I left my bathroom did I find another piece of paper floating on the surface tension. On the surface of my glass of Sprite I had in the living room. I carefully picked it out of my drink. It read, "Thank you," and in larger letters, "I'm trapped." I waved it around to dry it off a bit, and wrote on the back of it again, "Where are you trapped? How are you sending me notes?" And, not creative enough to think of where to put it, I just threw it behind my couch. I waited and looked, but I didn't see any other notes for the rest of that day. The next day I checked my mail. Inside of some spam letter was the next note. In the second dimension, below you, I wasted no time in responding whoever you are. This prank is retarded. Give it a rest and threw it outside. The wind blew it away. The next note I got was still in obnoxious capital letters, though it was much longer than before, and the last sentence seemed to have been squeezed into the remaining space. I think it was a passage from some encyclopedia or textbook. The first dimension is a defined point in space. The second dimension, this was underlined, is anything that exists with height and width, while the third adds on length. The fourth includes time, and the fifth is the past. Time that has already occurred and is solidified in time-space. Everything beyond that was too squished in to read. I rolled my eyes and responded again. How can you read this if you're in the second dimension? How can you even exist? I slipped this note into the space in my toaster between the element and the metal casing. My reply came when I brushed it out of my hair the next morning before I took a shower. Writing is to D, vision is to D, to D images superimposed. That didn't really get to the point of how I was supposed to rescue this person, which I defined in my next note that I flushed down my toilet. Make me 3D. Was all that was on the new slip of paper I found inside of a chocolate bar I unwrapped. Later on, how the idiot was putting these inside seal products was beyond me, but at this point I decided to play along. Maybe it was some kind of TV show thing. How was all I wrote for my reply. I remember exactly where I put it, because it was the last thing I wrote for a long time. I put it in a crack between my length mirror and its wooden backing. As soon as I let go, it slid out of sight, and I didn't see any papers again for a year and a half. Getting dressed one morning for work, I went into my room and adjusted my tie and shirt in my mirror, the same one, only it was now on the opposite side of my room. Looking into it, I noticed a square behind me on the wall. Turning around, there was none. In the instant before I turned around again, I thought it must have fallen off, but in the mirror it was still there, still sucked to the wall. I touched my mirror thinking maybe it was some sort of warping or optical illusion, but it wasn't. I lifted my heavy mirror up from the ground and slowly walked backwards with it, nearing myself to the opposite wall on which the paper was stuck. The closer I got, the clearer the message on it became, until I stopped, sandwiched it between the heavy mirror and the wall, looking at the paper immediately over my shoulder. Make you to D, it said. I moved the fuck out of that house as soon as I could. After bunking at my girlfriend's for a while, I got the fuck rid of the mirror, the toaster, everything. My heart still skips a beat when I see any perfectly square piece of paper sitting on the floor, all alone. I still live in fear someday I'll open up a book or look in the inner lining of a jacket and a piece of paper will flop out. I check all my things now constantly. I also don't drink coffee anymore. No sooner had I left my bathroom did I find another piece of paper floating on the surface tension. On the surface of my glass of Sprite I had in the living room. I carefully picked it out of my drink. It read, "Thank you," and in larger letters, "I'm trapped." I waved it around to dry it off a bit, and wrote on the back of it again, "Where are you trapped? How are you sending me notes?" And, not creative enough to think of where to put it, I just threw it behind my couch. I waited and looked, but I didn't see any other notes for the rest of that day. The next day I checked my mail. Inside of some spam letter was the next note. in the second dimension below you. I wasted no time in responding. Whoever you are, this prank is retarded. Give it a rest and threw it. Outside, the wind blew it away. The next note I got was still in obnoxious capital letters, though it was much longer than before, and the last sentence seemed to have been squeezed into the remaining space. I think it was a passage from some encyclopedia or textbook. The first dimension is a defined point in space. The second dimension, this was underlined, is anything that exists with height and width, while the third adds on length. The fourth includes time, and the fifth is the past. Time that has already occurred and is solidified in time-space. Everything beyond that was too squished in to read. I rolled my eyes and responded again. How can you read this if you're in the second dimension? How can you even exist? I slipped this note into the space in my toaster between the element and the metal casing. My reply came when I brushed it out of my hair the next morning before I took a shower. Writing is to D. Vision is to DTW. O to D images superimposed. That didn't really get to the point of how I was supposed to rescue this person, which I defined in my next note, that I flushed down my toilet. Make me 3D was all that was on the new slip of paper I found inside of a chocolate bar I unwrapped later on. How the idiot was putting these inside seal products was beyond me, but at this point I decided to play along. Maybe it was some kind of TV show thing. How was all I wrote for my reply. I remember exactly where I put it, because it was the last thing I wrote for a long time. I put it in a crack between my length mirror and its wooden backing. As soon as I let go, it slid out of sight, and I didn't see any papers again for a year and a half. Getting dressed one morning for work, I went into my room and adjusted my tie and shirt in my mirror, the same one, only it was now on the opposite side of my room. Looking into it, I noticed a square behind me on the wall. Turning around, there was none. In the instant before I turned around again, I thought it must have fallen off, but in the mirror it was still there, still sucked to the wall. I touched my mirror thinking maybe it was some sort of warping or optical illusion, but it wasn't. I lifted my heavy mirror up from the ground and slowly walked backwards with it, nearing myself to the opposite wall on which the paper was stuck. The closer I got, the clearer the message on it became, until I stopped, sandwich it between the heavy mirror and the wall, looking at the paper immediately over my shoulder. Make you to D, it said. I moved the fuck out of that house as soon as I could. After bunking at my girlfriend's for a while, I got the fuck rid of the mirror, the toaster, everything. My heart still skips a beat when I see any perfectly square piece of paper sitting on the floor, all alone. I still live in fear someday I'll open up a book or look in the inner lining of a jacket and a piece of paper will flop out. I check all my things now constantly. I also don't drink coffee anymore. Story 5. Camellia. Chambliss, the wealthy only son of a prosperous sugarcane plantation owner in Louisiana, is madly in love with Camellia, a slave woman, though they keep their relationship secret from his father and are separated until the father's passing, upon which Camellia moves into the house with Chambliss. When a cholera outbreak sweeps across the plantation, however, Camellia is not spared. The dark room, lit only by the lamp on the table, revealed Chambliss's grimacing countenance staring back at him from the chipped mirror on the wall above the bed. He looked down into her ashen face once so ebony, 10. Lively eye, now cadaverous in the clutches of cholera. He kissed her hand, her cheek, and she whispered in his ear, "Never let us part." Her eyes fluttered close, and the breath passed her full lips for the last time, and a deathly imitation of a sigh. I must have her back, he cried. She was my life, who now lies dead, and my heart lies dead there in her breast. As he said this, how truly he believed it was so, he could still hear her voice, calling his name, Chambliss, 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 like the rustling of the leaves, like the hushing of the sea, like the moaning of the trees. He fled the room, leaving the elderly housekeeper, Jehosephine, to tend the body as was proper, and the next date she was interred in the cemetery behind the church, not a mile from Chambliss's plantation home. Chambliss sat brooding on his porch, watching the sun as it sank slowly lower and lower into the deepening darkness of the Louisiana summer night. He looked to the horizon, towards the Gulf, and saw the mass of thunderclouds slowly rolling across the twilight sky, twisted forms of gray and black, tinged red at the edges. He heard the chanting of far-off voices in the bayou, where the ancient which Zenobia Laveau lived, the distant aunt of the beloved Camellia, practicing rituals of which no living mortal, save herself, knew the derivation of. Gogozina, as the witch was called by her followers, knew of many secrets beyond those of the traditional magic. Her very reputation was steeped in mysterious incantations and sacraments, and she knew, as one of her kind does when they are needed. Chambliss dropped into a slumber, no, not a slumber, a trance, cognizant of an electricity in the air, like that of a lightning storm. Before it strikes, he followed the current of it, stumbling over tree roots, sliding over trailing vines, into the bayou, as if pursued by the hell-hounds. He stopped only when he reached a clearing, lit by a bonfire, next to which squatted a wizened old woman, Gogozina, her eyes closed and rolling, fluttering back and forth in their sockets, while she muttered in a primeval tongue, guttural and rhythmic, rocking back and forth on her heels. He sat by the flames, and she opened her eyes, apparently expecting this visitor. At the time when the moon had passed the third quarter of the night sky, hidden as it was by the unyielding clouds, Con men lazaf, how are things, Messiah? Gogozina knows. Connin much things about any things, men, but what you want, not everything. Con men lazaf, Messiah, Camellia is not all. Con, I know. Why, you are Mori inside, and she is Mori outside, to mozo of a tout, pieces of a whole. How to fix it are the ways, and you go to her. Does she come back to you? Maybe work bon, or peut-être pas, maybe no. Gogozina rose to her feet, her dark wrinkled face shadowed heavily by the dying flames, her solid body throwing a stout shadow across the dirt and loam. She pressed a packet into his hands, a twisted paper, scented of spoiled flowers, telling him to burn it over her grave by the next dark moon, and lay the ashes in a trail to his house the next new moon, a night in which not a single light shone. A silky shroud of black broken only by swirling mist cloaked the land and the sky. As Chambliss carried out Gogozina's instructions, as he walked through the darkness, scattering the ashes as he went, the thunderheads gathered in the southern sky, rumbling discontentedly to themselves. The storm broke the next morning, soaking the land in a dampness that settled in the joints. From dawn until dusk the maelstrom raged on. The thunderclaps rumbled into the night, a ghastly thunderous night, and though the rain had ceased, the clouds still roiled. In the heavens a war fought by the souls of the dead as they pushed against the gates of this world. In the graveyard a damp figure crept about, dark-faced and dripping, the vaporous air of the cemetery clinging to her clothes. Chambliss sat by the fireplace, staring into the flickering flames, the fast-flitting fingers that licked at the charred logs. The wind moaned and the thunder crashed, the trees groaned and the branches rattled. He pretended not to notice when he heard the sound of the front door open and close. Half asleep, he dreamt of footsteps treading wearily down the hall. In dreams his subconscious had brought to him visions of Camellia, and now he saw them once again, but this time they were different. Her jet hair and ordered rows upon her head trickled muddy droplets to the floor, dirt forming crescent moons beneath her fingernails, and vagrant smudges on her cheeks. Her scent of flowers wilted. He rose from the sofa and took her in his arms, kissing her frigid mouth, touching her icy skin. He met her eyes with the longing of a man who thirsts for water, Tadistinae, and with the gratefulness of a man hungry for food who has been granted. But I'm dead serious. Stop. No. Well, it's your choice. I can't stop you. Well, consider this story a warning, and let's leave it at that. It was a completely normal day. It's always a normal day when these things happen. I was on here, reading creepy pastas to freak myself out. I used to like that sort of thing. I loved the feeling of chills running up my spine when I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye. After reading a story, I was going to read a ghost story I thought sounded interesting when something popped out at me. It was titled, I Dare You. It seemed to glow brighter than all the other stories shown on my screen. I was curious, so I clicked on it. This is how it went. Hello, I have a dare for you. Only the bravest of the brave will do it. We all have that one creepy person in the neighborhood, that pale, quiet girl in school, the crazy old man down the street, or the middle-aged woman who swore she heard voices when her husband died. Yes, that person. Go to their house. Sound easy, right? Well, here's the quirk. They know something you don't. All of them have one thing in common. They all have this one thing that makes them the way they are. You have to ask them what it is. It may sound easy, but you will figure it out. Good luck. I smirked at myself as I thought about Claire. Claire was the crazy person in my town. She always had wide eyes and rarely ever left her house. She always had a pained look on her face and always walked slowly. She seemed frail and harmless enough. I thought I should go. Then I read the single reply. It had no name. All it said was, "Don't Dwight T." I dismissed it immediately and turned off my computer. Time to go see Claire. It took about 15 minutes to get there, but I didn't stop walking. As I was walking up the steps to her house, I saw a curtain on one of the basement windows move. I peered over and saw Claire in the window. Her eyes seemed wider than ever, her long black hair, so I rung it a few more times. Still no answer. Being stubborn, I wasn't going to give up. I marched down over to her basement window and peered down into the basement. Claire was still standing at the window, so her pale face sacred me a little. I spoke through the window, hoping she could hear me. "Claire, I just want to talk. Please let me in." Claire shook her head again, and I heard her muffled voice come through the window. "No, Claire can't move." I had never heard her speak before, so I was confused by the way she referred to herself as Claire. I smiled gently at her. May I speak to you right here?" She studied my face for a minute, then gave a curt nod. She was so frightened I could see her trembling as she stood before me. Now it wasn't about the dare. I just needed to know. I took a deep breath and said, "Tell me what's bothering you, Claire." "I won't say anything, I swear." Her wide eyes grew even wider, and she squealed. I expected her to run, but she just fell onto her bottom, trying to avoid my gaze. I looked down at her. "Claire, tell me, please." She looked back up to me with tears streaming down her face. "Claire's second life. It's ruining. It's breaking Claire." I resisted the urge to run. Second life, I wondered. What the heck is she talking about? She looked back down, but kept speaking. "We all have second lives. Most just don't live theirs. Claire is living second life. It's horrible, the doors, the footsteps, the shrieking. It's too much for Claire." She abruptly stood up and tried to run in the other direction. After she took to running steps, she collapsed. She covered her ears and screamed. I pounded my hands on the glass. "Claire, what's happening?" I yelled. She looked at me, tears flowing even more freely now, and spoke quietly. I had to read her lips to figure out what she said. She had whispered, "Don't move." I shouted to her, "I'm going to get help, Claire. Don't." Worrying, I stood and started running. But right as I took the first step, I understood. A wave of pain washed over my whole body with each step I took. Sound of doors slamming and creaking open and closed, loud footsteps, and the voices of people who I had ever done wrong by, yelling, shrieking, and crying filled my ear. I was overwhelmed, so much that I only had managed a squeak before I collapsed to the ground. The sound quieted and the pain dull after a bit, but flashes of wit filled my eyes. I turned my head to Claire's window. I could hear her faint shrieks coming from the window. She had managed to bring herself back up to it again. I didn't dare move closer. I knew what was happening. My second life had begun. I know I'll go mad like Claire if I take one more step. We don't know what causes out second lives to start, but you never know. It could just be knowing about it, but don't say I didn't warn you. Yours could have started right now. Our only request is, don't move. Story 7, The Singing Man. Grandpa told me a long time ago about a man he once saw walking in the snow. The man's shoes were golden and brown. The colors were the sun and the blood of the town. Bonus stories. Story 1, The Occupants. The storm door slammed shut and blew open with an ominous repetitiveness. The wind raged so strong you could feel the massive gusts through the weakening and weathered walls of the home. Inside, the occupants huddled within themselves, seemingly unaffected by the storm ripping through the world around them, tearing down structures, flooding the valleys, taking with it the sense of peace the occupants had once known. The cold had overcome the growingly smaller fire, finally diminishing it, leaving the occupants with a chill that shook their bones and chattered their teeth. The days before the storm seemed long ago, even the first fateful days filled with optimism and survival strategies could not be touched without most stretched of fingertips. Followed were the days of terrors, rationed meals, and grim acceptance. But today was different. It was the seventh day. The seventh day promised to bring the end of the storm. The storm would not go peacefully, though. It would take anything and everything it could with it. the occupants being what it wanted the most. The seventh night had now begun, and a new sense of hope had begun growing within the occupants. Though they dare not express it for fear of it growing too large, it began to blaze within them as the eerie creaking of the walls softened and the breezes that had been ripping through their bodies lightened. As dawn neared, the faintest of smiles appeared on their lips. The occupants now swelled with hope, believing their Savior had slayed the storm. Haunting them, they had been spared. The occupants now rose as a mother, a father, to wide-eyed children, a family. They wept with joy, tears flowing like beautiful rivers down their faces. The family hugged and kissed and continued to weep as they heard the final feeble gust of wind brush against the walls. Everything was well again. The family stepped outside for the first time in what seemed to be a lifetime. The sun had almost fully risen, and everything now appeared still and quiet. It was beautiful and wondrous, although everything around them wrecked and dismembered. The occupants could see nothing but beauty, though, until the oddest of phenomenons began to occur. The dust, the debris, all appeared to be floating. A deafening booming began to sound. The occupants hurriedly covered their ears and turned around to see the wave. In moments it was upon them, and then beyond them, leaving nothing behind but a blank, quiet canvas. The occupants had now almost never existed. No sounds of weeping could be heard for miles. There was no hope to swell within, no joy to be felt. There were no last loving embraces or tearful goodbyes. There was nothing. Even the walls they had imprisoned themselves in were now gone. Not a single sign of them was left. If anyone were to ever walk by this barren road again, they would know nothing of the occupants or even the storm that had ripped through it. It would be just another road. But maybe, just maybe, and they felt a slight breeze walking through, they would be stuck the strangest of sadnesses. Story 2. 6:30. It was happening tonight at 6:30. I checked the watch on my wrist. 6:26. I was beginning to get antsy. It has been a long time since something of this magnitude occurred. I watched and waited as the second hand moved little by little, inch by inch. Time had never seemed to move so slowly. Suddenly I began sweating profusely. Reaching for a nearby cloth, I wiped the beads of moisture from my forehead. 6:27. Maybe I should call it off. Maybe I should run. Maybe I made a mistake. No, I had to stick to the plan. Did I? It wasn't too late. Yes, it was. I can't go back. There was no other option. 6:28. Crunch time. I stood up. There was no way I could keep still any longer. I started pacing. Thoughts zooming through my mind. Left hand, right. Was I sure? Is this really what it has come to? I was positive. Yes, I was positive. There was no going back. There was no doubt now, only determination. I was ready. 6:29. Here we go. Just a few seconds away. My heart was pounding like a drum in my chest. I tried to relax, but with no avail. I felt prepared but weak and powerless at the same time. There was nothing else I could do to ease the tension. Nothing. I had to power through. I've been waiting for this moment for too long to let it slip away. 6:30. Finally. It was finally time. Nothing happened. I didn't understand. How could nothing happen? 6:30 was the time. 6:30 was the time. Am I insane? No, I'm not insane. 6:30 was the time. I know it. I'm not insane, am I? I glanced at my watch. 6:31. Why just WHY. I remained motionless. I didn't know what to do. I thought I couldn't think. All of a sudden I couldn't think because of a ringing. I hear a ringing, quiet at first, growing in volume. The sound, all of a sudden very loud, was penetrating my ears to the point where I thought my eardrums would surely burst. It wouldn't stop. The constant ringing in my head followed me down as I clawed at my ears and crumpled to the floor. The ringing continued. It continued for what seemed like an infinite eternity of pain in which was impossible for me to endure any longer. I started to lose consciousness. I felt myself slipping from the real world, and, strangely, I was okay with it. 6:31, everything was dark, my mind and body numb. I heard nothing. Wait, I didn't hear anything. There was no ringing. My eyes opened. I heard pure silence, pure, beautiful silence. Slowly I rose to my feet, brushing myself off. I reached forward and grabbed the handle. I turned it, the door flew open, and a bright light flooded my vision. Then a voice spoke. "That'll be $12.75. The pizza had arrived. I paid the man and closed the door, smiling to myself. I walked to my seat. Pan pizza with thick cheesy crust and extra pepperoni in hand. I collapsed into the recliner. I was at peace. Story 3. Don't answer your cell phone while driving. You're speeding down a country road late at night through a slowly building fog. Speeding because you're tired and want to get home. Normally you wouldn't even be here, but a colleague suggested this shortcut. You're a lawyer at a firm that deals with work injuries, involuntary manslaughter, car accidents, and the like. Despite having your headlights on, visibility is starting to cut out as the fog slowly gets thicker. You're just beginning to consider slowing down when your phone rings, interrupting your thoughts. The man on the other end is gibbering about having been in some sort of car accident. You get calls like this all the time. The man is panicky, as they always are, and you're waiting for him to take a breath so you can ask who he is. The man's voice suddenly stops, but you sense there's something wrong, and so don't say anything. After several seconds, he whispers, in an obviously terrified voice, "Who is this?" You're about to answer when suddenly, out of the fog, a body approaches and strikes your car. You slam on the brakes as the body arches away and disappears in the fog. You just hit somebody with your car. This is bad. You were speeding through a fog with no visibility while talking on a cell phone. Your firm handles cases like this, but all you can really do is damage control. You start racking your brain, looking for an excuse that a court might buy when the thought comes to you. You may have just killed someone. You jump out of your car and, hanging up on whoever had called you, frantically try to dial your law firm's senior partner. Really, you're just punching numbers. You're pretty panicky, and you just run straight ahead, looking for the body to see if whoever you just hit is still alive. The phone picks up on the other end, and you say, "Oh my God, I just hit someone with my car. I might have killed him. There's this fog and it's dark and I didn't see him and I might have killed a man. What do? I can't find his body because of the fog. What do?" You babble on for a few more seconds as you run down the road, looking for the body. Suddenly you stop talking because you experience a shock of déjà vu. Not a sense of it, but a shock. The words that you're saying, the panicky, desperate descriptions you're giving over the phone, these are the words you heard right before you hit. The man This is the phone call you receive while driving down the road in the fog. Into the phone, you whisper, "Who is this?" On the other end, you hear a sharp bark and the sound of tires squealing, several seconds of silence, then a car door opening, and the phone goes dead. And where's the body? You should have found it by now. You turn around to see how far you've come from your car. You can see the headlights about 50 meters away, and they're getting closer. Story 4. Oblivion. I remember an ominous shadow crouch over me, then the plastic bag being forced over my head, asphyxiating me. I remember screaming for help, but I wasn't making any sound. My head began to feel like the earth itself. I wonder, is this how Atlas feels? Fragments of chaotic hallucinations and dreams being played backwards began to take over, and I fell. But I don't remember that part. Several hours later, millions of heartbeats sooner, I wake up in a bathroom stained with blood, cruel graffiti engraved on tiles, like the poetry of savages before me or the artwork of deviants, not so different from me. Say, what is the name of this place? Does it go by names past vandals gave it, like hate or war? No, I'll simply call it oblivion. After all, no one is here. There's stains of blood and grime everywhere. There's an empty bottle of pain pills with the cap missing. I think there's a skull in the opposite corner. There's a knife lodged in the skull. That skull used to belong to someone, perhaps me. Maybe this is what it's like to be dead. There's a wooden door with paint flakes chipping off like crystals. Beyond the door, I can hear music, a song so beautifully crafted, so enchanted, so haunted. Maybe it's the soundtrack to my own requiem. In the gore-stained mirror, a familiar face like a sacred lily in a garden of poison hemlock. But lilies are toxic too, even though they appear pretty. So I grab the skull and smash the mirror with it, screaming death cries as the glass shatters. My friend, my familiar friend, greets me with a wicked, sinister flame blazing in her eyes. 1,000 scars drawn on her face. I read the scriptures embedded within these scars and see the entire synopsis of my life, without syntax, just a random mixture of words, but I can extract meaning from the chaos. I read the sickly sweet, corrupted fable of my childhood. Black sheep are slaughtered on the fascist altar of sacrifice. I'm running away. The shepherd is chasing after me. All the villagers are chanting funeral hymns. All these images are corrupt. So I pry the knife from the skull and jam it into her heart. That there is no heart, only endless darkness, and she vanishes. I have achieved masochistic euphoria. Everything is back to the way it was before. There's water dripping from the ceiling. A spider's web is hanging like a tapestry, and suddenly I remember where I put the cap to the pain pills. I reach into my pocket, grab the cap, and screw it back on. I read the warning label. Possible side effects include madness, despair, misery, agony. Then I noticed something about the skull. It was handcrafted just like the religions of the world. It must be God's skull. The music in the other room has ceased. The door swings open, and there are 5,000 people with plastic bags covering their heads, standing there, lifeless, like a photograph. And they all have something in common. They all want to kill me. They all want to kill me. Story 5. You find yourself in a tunnel. You find yourself in pitch darkness. You don't entirely know where you are. How you got there, you simply don't remember. Neither you thought to yourself at that moment, do you care your main priority was just to get out of there? You start feeling your immediate surroundings for something to grab onto. That nauseating feeling of vertigo from wandering in the dark without any surfaces from which you are able to orientate yourself is getting really unbearable. Your hands made contact with a chilly, wet wall, slightly arched as you move your arm higher. Involuntarily, you let out a sigh of relief. You finally get a sense of direction, a guide. Which way, though? You still have one more choice to make. Proceed forward or take steps back. It's said you proceed forward. The voice has been with you for your whole life, but generally you don't pay attention to it. However, now that you have nothing else to pay attention to, it becomes all the more pestering, annoying, as you walk, still with both hands pressed firmly against the wall. What was initially a mere trickle of water transformed into a raging waterfall. Gradually, though, perhaps too gradual for you to care, you almost felt like you had to continue walking forward. You feared the presence of uncannily human-like demons approaching from the other direction. Water poured on the floor. You stood with a loud thud, yet you felt no impact of it on your heels, not even your foot. For some reason, they were numb to it. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It lamented, "Oh, shut it. Even shadows cannot be cast without light." It must have been a few hours by now. Days, perhaps. You have completely lost track of time. You have been walking in the same tunnel, with the same limited sensations for what feels like an eternity. You are practically stumbling around aimlessly, lost, if not for that water-soaked wall. Your only purpose was to find the exit. Abandon this, already abandoned, rotting hen and strained tunnel. Suddenly, as you round a bend, you see a bright beam of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel. Do you really want to do this? I've walked this far. What else would I want to do? You have cold blood on your hands. Is it wrong if it belongs to no one else? So you really are just going to step into that abyss. It's extremely bright from where I can see it. You really don't care. Do you care for them? Who? The things behind me. Don't act ignorant. You know more than anyone else who they are, and how much they'll suffer. I know even more that this is my light. Even shadows cannot be cast without light. With that, you took the final step off the top floor of your apartment building. Story 6. You'll be okay. On our way home from vacation, my 5-year-old daughter and I got stuck in traffic caused by an accident up ahead. My daughter asked why we had stopped, and I told her someone had wrecked. That's when she responded with, "Remember when that happened to me?" I was confused. She'd never been in a car accident. I laughed, thinking she was playing pretend or something, and asked her what she was talking about. "Don't you remember? We was going to the store, and then we hit something, and then the glass cut me, and it hurt so bad, and I was so scared at first. I thought I was dying, but Daddy kept saying I would be okay, and I knew he wouldn't lie." I just stared at her for a minute, not sure what to say. For one thing, the whole thing was crazy. I had never been in an accident, and neither had my daughter. And the other thing was, she didn't have a daddy. I mean, of course, she had a father, but he wasn't part of the picture. Never had been. So where was she getting this from? Traffic cleared, and we continued on our way home, and it slipped from my mind. A few weeks later, while on the phone with my mom. I remembered it and told her about it. After a pause, my mom told me that when she was just about 3 years old, there had been a car accident, and that her older sister, who was 5 at the time, had been killed when a piece of glass from the windshield had somehow slit her throat. It was such a tragedy that for the most part her family tried to pretend it hadn't happened, getting rid of everything that reminded them of her sister and never mentioning it, which is why I never knew about it. My mom said she could barely remember the accident itself, since she was so young, but she said she'd never forget her dad crying as he held her sister in his arms and repeated over and over again, "You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You'll be okay." I felt chills run down my spine as I wondered how my daughter could have possibly known that. Story 7. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. You know we're here, where that presence you feel, the thing that pushes you to run up or down the stairs as if the steps were made of hot coals. We're the thing that keeps you turning around when walking down a dark, empty street alone. We're the thing that makes you cower under the covers. We find that useless, we're strong enough to rip those blankets from your sweaty, fear-filled grasp, but only if we wanted to. Right now we don't. If you continue to run from us, which you should, we won't feel the need to get you, at least right now anyways. But if you try to confront us, befriend us, you're sorely mistaken. The only thing that keeps us at bay is the amusement we get from toying with you. If you try something stupid, like walking slowly down a dark alleyway with your head held high, then we'll find you. The people that find your bodies will be lucky they can scrape up enough of you to be identified. Or if you try something else, something riskier, like maybe using an Ouija board, we won't need to find you, because things far worse than us with bright red eyes will get you. Remember that girl who played with one, the one the police said ran away because in all the years they hadn't even found a body? Or maybe you know her from a friend, or perhaps you met her in a nightmare. The creatures that got her won't even show as much mercy as we will. How could they show any remorse? They'll be too busy picking your warm, sticky flesh from their teeth. So next time you feel like being rebellious, don't. If you do, pray that we find you, and not the beings even worse than us, things beyond your worst nightmares, things that will haunt your dreams. So don't look for us or them. And stop looking under the bed or checking the closet. Lastly, stop moving the shower curtain to make you feel safer, because one time when you slide the curtain to the side, someone will be there, and they won't be friendly. You'll want to know what they're doing in there, or what they are, but trust me, I've been a victim of that ignorance. You should never ask questions you don't want the answer to. That's right, I played a little game. It's no longer a game, it's life, and now I'm trapped endlessly, forever, inside the board that called my killers. You see, though I'm not dead, I'm here, I'm watching. I'm waiting too, just waiting to drag you down into the abyss in which my soul resides. So hurry along now, because by now you know too much, and by now they're in your house, watching, waiting. Next time you look for them, they won't hide. And remember, don't ask questions you don't want the answers to.